So this is our basic analysis report. And this is on some Honeycrisp apples last summer. So as we are looking at this, we'll go through a few of the basic analytes and what they mean. So as you see here, you start with your pH reading of your new leaves as opposed to the old leaves. And our primary indicators are pH, EC, and Brix. If your pH of your new leaves is similar to the old leaves, that's generally a positive thing. Now, I want to make a quick distinction here between sap pH of a crushed leaf that includes the cellular structures or not. Because what we often see in our analysis is that this goal of having a leaf fluid pH of 6.4 is very difficult to achieve without extreme levels of practical nutrient balancing and abundant minerals in all amounts. So what I would say is when you achieve that, you can get very, very close to 6.4, but the technique of applying your sap pH at home and correlating it to the results that we receive in the lab will not hold. What I would say is we've seen very few crops that have 6.4 pH and were extremely well balanced. We've seen a few, but most of them hover around what we would refer to as your statewide average. And when I refer to statewide average, it's not your statewide average of your crop yield. It's your statewide average of actual pH of the plant fluids. So in Honeycrisp apples, generally speaking, you're looking at somewhere from 5.4 to 5.8. And in blueberries, you might be somewhere around 3.7 to 3.8 or 3.6, somewhere in there. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Similarly to having a different reading in pH, we also have different readings in Brix. And if you look at our Brix readings here, those are very high Brix readings, and that is because the fluid that we analyze is extremely concentrated. So we've seen Brix in certain crops that are deep in fruiting, up on our test upwards of 30, and that's a very, very high Brix reading. So it just goes to show you that we have extremely concentrated fluids. Now, additionally, in this particular crop, you're seeing that the Brix is actually higher in the new leaf as opposed to the old leaf, which is generally a good sign. You want your Brix to constantly be going up as you're filling fruit and getting towards harvest. Okay, so your EC. So then on your EC, you have a basic reading here of 12/15. Now each crop has a different range of EC that it prefers in the soil as well as in the plant. There's some general ranges listed on our frequently asked questions, and I'd encourage you to monitor the EC of your plant through fertilizer or as you correlate it to your fertilizer recommendations that you're receiving from your agronomist or implementing independently. And the reason being is oftentimes you'll see a increase in EC to a very large degree after an application of nitrogen or potassium. But you'll also see an increase or a stabilization or slight decrease of EC if your plant is essentially has some toxicities that you've dealt with. So if you can deal with those toxicities, your EC will then balance out and into whatever the appropriate range that you would like it to be. Okay, so next, like I was mentioning a few minutes ago, we've got our mobile nutrients here, and if in this particular case, we would have you have the ammonium as higher in the new leaves as opposed to the old leaves. Actually, sorry, this particular crop is actually dead on, which we rarely see in terms of ammonium. So this plant actually has about the perfect amount of ammonium, which is very rare. But in this case, it's actually a very well-balanced plant. You then, over here on the other side, coming over to nitrate, you have the nitrate is in surplus. So in other words, we have plenty of nitrogen in this plant, and our conversion to ammonium is essentially perfect. So we have a surplus of nitrogen, and the plant has, as indicated by the lower or the greater ppm value in your old leaf, and the plant has a balanced amount of ammonium in there. So essentially that's a very good reading for as far as nitrogen. Next, I would say that we would look then to phosphorus. And when you look at phosphorus, you can see a really nice level here, a big surplus of phosphorus as well. So as indicated by a surplus in the old leaf. Now, if these numbers were reversed and you had 934 over 497, that would be a significant deficiency. Okay, so moving on to potassium. Now, as maybe some of you know, or maybe some of you are Honeycrisp growers, Honeycrisp apples have a significant potassium demand. And so I want to direct your attention here to the potassium in the old leaves has dropped below the potassium in the new leaves. And the potassium in the new leaves then is pulling the potassium out of the old leaves in order to fill the fruit. So you've got a constant translocation out of the old leaves into the new leaves, and then from there into the fruit. And so this is what you see when you see the yellowing on the bottom of the plant, or you see some tip burning, etc. That's often a very common thing within potassium deficiencies. Additionally, in this particular crop, you've got the magnesium number has dropped below and the old growth has dropped below the number in the new growth. So you then see a deficiency of magnesium in this particular crop. Okay, so there's a lot of your mobile nutrients and that they've been and how they've been would show up as nutrient deficiencies or excesses. Okay, so then looking towards your immobile nutrients, let's take something like boron. So in this particular case, we've got 3 over 5. So essentially boron is short, zinc is short, iron is short, silicon is short, and copper is slightly short, although I'll address that in a second. When you see the lower value on your immobile nutrients in your new leaves, generally speaking, you need to understand that is showing you that you should address that as a deficiency. Now, there's some cases, and there's actually 2 in this particular crop, where you've got an excess. And the excess then is over here with your copper at 17 ppm. So 17 ppm of copper is not necessarily a toxic excess, but the plant's telling you that it would prefer to have 8 ppm or 8.9. So in other words, the plant is trying to reduce its copper levels and push them out the bottom end of the plant. You see this often as plants develop toxicities. And another toxicity in this case is in your chlorides in this particular crop. So this crop then has, in the chlorides you see down here, you've got a significant higher level of chloride in this crop than you do in the old leaves than you do in the new. So anyway, as a lot of you may know, sampling the new leaves and the old leaves and comparing them to one another is a way to gain insight. Now, the bigger deal, though, as far as we're concerned in our lab, is how different are those two leaves. So if you come back down to this example of the copper, the new leaf has roughly 50% of the old leaf, and the old leaf then has twice that of the new leaf. So we get a lot of questions on what's the gradient. Well, the gradient is the difference between the new and the old leaves. And why do we express this? Is because it's very easy to dismiss, oh, 8 ppm of copper is not that much. That's 17. That's only 8 ppm. That's not a lot. Well, the plant right here is telling you that it's about twice the amount that it can tolerate. And that's that's a point I really want to drive home, is that's why we've taken the time to go beyond just comparing the 2 ppm values on our reporting to actually reporting how different they are from one another in terms of percent. Chloride over here, you're 159% high. So in other words, the plant would prefer to have 159% less chloride than it has at that current moment. And where does that chloride then tie up? Well, you see some tie up over here in your calcium. You'll see a little bit of tie up on your nitrate translocation into the new leaves. You'll see a little further depression of the boron and the molybdenum, and so on and so on. This is why it's important to really look at both the percent difference as well as the ppm values on our reports. It's very common for folks to dismiss, something like this zinc deficiency at, 50% off, right? The plant would like almost 50% more zinc in its new leaves than in its old leaves in this particular instance. That is a significant nutrient demand that needs to be addressed, that if you were not looking at the plant in this depth, you will have a hard time assessing. Okay, so moving on, we've got some visual interpretations of our new leaf to old leaf ratios, pH, conductivity, and Brix. We do, taking a quick sidestep, we get questions as to why we do both qualitative and quantitative Brix. I would say that is mostly a remnant of our lab when we started. And when we first started our lab, we were primarily dealing with with the clients that we do direct consulting for. And at that time, we wanted to access the fuzzy line in the visual Brix meter that some of you may be familiar with at a high calcium, when you have a high calcium percentage in the plant. So that's why we did the Brix 2 ways. Additionally, it helps us to actually develop a relatively accurate calibration. Okay, so then your nitrate to ammonium ratios, these are very important for different types of crops, annual to perennial. Do you does a plant really like to feed on ammonium? Will it feed on nitrate? Does it like a protein, amino acid source of nitrogen? There's a lot of different ways to approach nitrogen management, and this is one that can help you determine that balance. As plants become more nitrate heavy, generally speaking, you have a greater susceptibility to unwanted outcomes. Poor fruit quality, diseases, insects, etc. We've graphed both our anions and cations as percentages and proportion in relation to one another in order to allow you to see some of the actual ranges of what how they compare. So it's a stark education point sometimes when you pull up your lab analysis and you're 90% of your sulfur on your anions. We see that a lot of times in guys that are spraying sulfur all day long. And for guys that are doing that, I often encourage them to get into some sort of a, essential oil-based fungicides or insecticides to assist some of the imbalances that can happen within the plant from too much sulfur. Moving on down the chart, you've got your micronutrient cations and your micronutrient anions graphed in a bar graph against one another, and those show in proportion. Now, at different times in the plant's growth stage, you'll have slightly different desired numbers of manganese, ratio of iron to manganese, or manganese to copper, or manganese to zinc. But generally speaking, there's some hard and fast rules, and that is the plant, generally speaking, wants slightly more iron than manganese, more manganese than zinc, and more zinc than copper, more copper than cobalt, more, and so on. So we see very often when those micronutrient cations are out of balance, you see physiological problems within the plant, such as a decreased growth habitat, limited shoot growth, decreased translocation into the new leaves, and essentially in extreme cases where you have copper, maybe at 1,000% high or 2,000% high, you'll actually see the trees just begin to die. Okay, so then down here, these are basically our salinity issues as associated with this particular crop. And I say salinity issues because, as I mentioned at the outset, sodium drives potassium in the plant. So the sodium to calcium ratio is a very crucial one for anybody that's in a low organic matter soil, because your soil will always directly limit your calcium intake, and it will also drive more potassium. So it's kind of a double whammy. So any of you guys that are in low organic matter soils, or have high salts, or have salt buildup, or any of those particular characteristics of soils, I'd encourage you really to focus on that calcium to sodium and calcium to potassium ratios in both the new and old leaves, and try to drive those to a point where you're getting the crop growth habitat that you prefer. Okay, and last but not least, we've got our mobile and immobile indicators graphed. And so what these are down here is they're your percent positive or percent negative differences graphed and grouped together with one another as immobile or mobile nutrients, and they are graphed in order of the imbalance within a plant. So nature wants balance, and anytime we test plants out in nature that Mother Nature is taking care of, they're on no fertilization program, they are always very, very balanced and very, very low levels. So in other words, nature keeps plants hungry and she keeps them balanced. So she makes them work for their nutrients, but she also doesn't throw them out of balance. Man, in his innate infinite wisdom, has a tendency to throw nutrients out of balance just by breathing, really, or by any sort of fertilizer application can potentially cause an imbalance. Now, proper fertilization then can do the opposite, right? It can take what Mother Nature had intended and create something exceptionally extraordinary from it. And we've all seen it maybe at a farmer's market with a really good grower, or the guy down the road that you wish you could grow like, or man, that one apple that you ate 10 years ago that you can still remember the crunch of it. All of those would be characteristics of a crop that's highly balanced and has abundant nutrients. But navigating a lot of this can be a very, very big minefield. So anyway, that's our basic report, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions about that. We get questions all the time, and they're ongoing, and we welcome them. We're constantly making slight improvements, and this is actually one of our old reports. We've added cobalt and selenium to our more recent reporting as well. And that's not included in this report. So Anyway, moving on to the next slide. Okay, so I want to take a second to pull up our online data reporting just so you guys can see that. So this is our, I hope you guys can see this, but if not, bear with me. But this is our website, and you can see the reports look slightly different from the sample report that I'd included there. Our mobile and immobile nutrients look slightly different. I'd encourage you to get to know our website a little bit. There's some really cool features, such as you can buy recommendations from our agronomists and our team here at Apical. If you ever have a question on any of your reports, if you want to share your report with another agronomist, you can click the blue button up in the right-hand corner, and then you can share the report with anybody that you ever want to. You can then share, or you can download direct to PDF and print out your report on a single page through the button up here in the right-hand corner, and that's what it looks like. And then that'll render to a one-page report that you can view at home. There's charting features on our website as well, where you can begin to, and that's a little bit too detailed for what we can do today, but we do have a charting feature where you can begin to compare and contrast different crops that you've tested with us with one another, and we've got a number of different ways to express your data.
Hey David, can I jump in real quick? I think right now you're still on your PowerPoint. I think if you go in and share the website, go into the share button, it should be able to switch over, because right now we're just seeing the online reporting and data management slide. So I think you'll have to go in. So there it is. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. I'm new to this Zoom website here. So anyway, backing up a second. So if you want to, say you've gotten a report with us, and this is how they render, and you get an email in your inbox that says, here's your report, go click on the link to view it. If you haven't paid us yet, it'll send you to a payment screen. If you have, then you'll be able to view your report immediately. Like I was mentioning, here's your share button up here. Click that and you can share it with whoever you'd like. If you want to download a PDF of the report, you click the PDF button up here, and that renders the report to a single page that then you can print off on your printer. It renders very well to most printers. And then, like I was also mentioning, here's our charting page. And so any reports that you have received from us, you will then be able to chart and gain maybe further insights from comparing and contrasting your variety of reports. You can look at different cultivars from one another. You can look at multiple elements and how they compare to one another. You can chart a nutrient or multiple nutrients over time, and so on. There's a lot of features, and it takes some time to get to know the website and how to utilize it properly. But in other words, you can render custom charts. You can do your own research experiments on farm. You can compare and contrast different nutrient programs against one another and have very, very valid data that is then extremely easy to access and configure and change variables and recompare and so on and so on. So we put a lot of work into the database, and so I hope that you folks really enjoy it. We do also offer a weather plugin on our website as well. I'm just going to give this a quick plug. And basically, it will give you a wide range of, in other words, you can actually program your fields and cultivars into the website and associate them with a zip code, and it will show you the most up-to-date weather information for your particular zip code. So like I mentioned at the outset, we're constantly adding features to the website, and as new features come available, we'll do our best to provide updates to our clientele. So that's the charting, that's the website. Anyway, there's a lot of, there are help section. You guys may need to reference that as you're getting started. Frequently asked questions, sampling guides, shipping labels, etc. Ways to contact us, email and phone. There's different ways that you can order new reports online. You can check the status of the reports online. All your crops and cultivars can render on your homepage, and you'll see different, all your different analyses that you've done with us show up on your home screen after they've been posted to your account. So these are some, this is what it looks like when you have your own account with us, and so on. And anybody can have an account as long as you have an email address. You can sign up for an account online, and you can begin to get started. There's a lot of information we do a little bit of soil and water analysis as well. And so there's a lot of information here on how to get started, about us, and so on. And so, I'd encourage those of you that are not familiar with us just to do a little, spend 5-10 minutes on the website, just getting to know us a little bit better and why we're doing what we're doing, and so on. So I think with that, I'll switch back to the PowerPoint and just finish up with that. So I don't know what you guys can see, but anyway, if you've got any further questions, that's our website, and we've got a great staff both in the lab and as well as support staff to help interpret your results and help get you guys the results that you need to get the crops that you want. So I think that's about all I've got for today, but I want to open it up now for questions. So I'm going to open the Okay, so the first question is, isn't chloride for charge balance, won't it always be high, and have you seen it low in healthy crops? Yes, no, and yes. So yes, chloride definitely does move in a way that it will tend to balance out excess cations, and calcium and chloride will be pulled into the plant in that way. So if you have excess of cations in one form or another, you will most likely have a excess of chloride. And the biggest cation that we see being counterbalanced by chloride is sodium. So that is the case there. Won't it always be high? I would say no. We've recently been fortunate enough to see the benefits of what happens when you raise chloride. We actually had a crop that we've been working with on a 100-acre block of blueberries, where we are on track to hopefully double the production in one growing season from its 7 most recent historical seasons, due to an application of a calcium chloride based on an analysis that we ran last year that said the chlorides were deficient. So after applying chloride to this particular block, we received a extreme plant response in terms of the plant not dropping any of its fruit, and that it does in most years, as well as a increased growth habitat. So it won't always be high, and we see it low in a lot of potting soils type situations, high organic matter, and so on. We see it very high in high mineral soils, hard water situations, excess chemical fertilizers, and so on. Next question. So how different will the new leaf versus old leaf numbers be if the leaves were sampled were close or far away from the other? I would say that would be dependent on the crop and the balance that the crop has achieved. So in a healthy crop that is very well balanced, you'll see most likely your numbers will be 5 to 10% difference on most nutrients. In from the new leaf to the old leaf, regardless of if you're pulling from the very top of the plant and a fully expanded leaf to the bottom of the plant on the plant's oldest still viable leaf. Okay, next question. Wouldn't the copper on the Honeycrisp apples need to be increased because the new leaf is at 8 ppm versus the old leaf at 17 ppm? At what point would one determine the particular micronutrient needs versus knowing the plant is trying to shed that element due to an excess? For example, if the zinc was at 20 in the new and 40 in the old, would this mean it's deficient or that plant is trying to shed an excess out the bottom? Great question. And this is subject to something we're actually trying to incorporate into the database. So we see the nutrients when a plant is happy with the level of a particular micronutrient, it will have a tendency to show, in this particular case, whether it's copper or zinc or iron or manganese, it will show if the plant is pleased with the level of micronutrients it has of that particular one, it will show that number higher in the new leaf than the old leaf. And that is, and so in what I'm saying here is you might see a copper that's 3/2, and that, 3 in the new leaf and old and 2 in the old, and that plant has plenty of copper. When the plant goes the other direction and has, like you said, in this case, it's got, I think it was 8/17, that is actually showing that the plant is trying to, as you phrased it, shed copper, because it actually is showing you still that the plant has less in the new leaf than the old. Now, the reason that is the case is because the plant is actually exhibiting a tie-up more than it's exhibiting a deficiency. And this is a subject of where the results get, this is where the results don't necessarily always adhere to the rudimentary explanation. And so in this particular case, the copper was being limited by the amount of phosphorus, and that's why it showed higher levels in the old leaves as opposed to the new leaves, while simultaneously it had excess. So there's general ranges that we have for most crops where we know that crops would like to be. And when they are interfered with or antagonized in one way or another, we will see that depression or alleviation of that balance. And when the balance is not achieved, you will see the ratios off. And as those ratios go off, you'll have a toxicity or a deficiency depending. So I hope that was clear. If it's not, feel free to email me for more information, but that is definitely probably the one limitation of our reporting structure is how to diagnose a toxicity when the plant doesn't obey the normal reporting rules of new to old leaf gradients due to an antagonism of another nutrient. So we're working on including that, and in fact, changing the highlighting colors on our leaf reports to, we're going to be adding some blues and purples and some other colors that will actually direct you to those deficiencies. But great question. Probably couldn't have asked a better question. So how are the target and optimal values per variety determined? Another great question. So the optimal target values is the plant will actually tell you them by actually achieving balance. So when we're determining target values for a particular crop, what we do is we'll take all the data that we have for that crop and we crunch numbers and we run statistics on it. And the statistics then spit out the mean, the high and the low, the mean high, the mean low, and then the mean mean. And so the average of the average, and then the average of the high and the average of the low for both new and old leaves. So the target and optimal values are basically dictated by two things. One, our historical data, and two, the balance between the new leaf to the old leaf. Next question. So do we offer Malic 3 testing and paste testing? We do not. We actually offer what we refer to as soil solution analysis, which is a water-based extraction that is slightly different than paste testing and significantly different than Malic 3. What we have found is our soil solution analysis does correspond significantly to the nutrient availability within the soils as indicated by the plant analysis. Okay, that's all the questions that I'm seeing here at the moment. Are there any other questions that anybody has?
No, this is Dennis here at Tineo, and I just want to thank you for coming on and giving us all of this information. One of the great things that we talk about all the time here, and Bruce used to talk about, is test, don't guess. And it comes back when you showed that first picture of the difference in leaf size and that cell development associated with that size. And one of the things that we always correlate here for a grower is we see that same expression genetically in the plant based on fruit size, fruit quality, cell structure. When we start to talk about cherries and firmness and Honeycrisp and Bitter Pit and all these types of things, we just see such a direct correlation when we address the nutritional needs. And we've always said that an excess is, to me, a much larger problem than a deficiency. And I just really appreciate you answering some of those questions for our growers today, David.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis and Steve. Yeah, it's a lot to sort out, and we're just doing the best we can to try to provide a tool for growers. And like I mentioned, we're always constantly trying to improve both our analytical methods in the lab through different types of statistical validation and improvements, as well as the reporting on the website and adding new features and so on. So yeah, thanks for everybody that showed up today and got on the call. For those of you that I've never met before and we've never worked together, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule. And for those that we do know and have spoken with before, glad to have you again. And if you've got other questions, feel free to call the number on our contact page of our website or email info@apical-ag.com. And yeah, big thanks to Tineo, Dennis, Steve, Jenny, and everybody else up there. You guys are great, and appreciate you having us on today.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. We enjoyed having you this morning.
All right. Thanks. Take care.